everybody. So what we're going to be doing today, we are working on page 47 of your unit packet. So it says practice graphing final Toyota Prius. So what you're going to have very shortly is a graphing final that looks very similar to this. So if you go ahead, if you look at what we have given you, you see there at the top a supply and demand schedule. So okay, what are we going to do with that? Let's read number one. The price of the Toyota Prius is determined by market forces. They all start like that. Currently, the demand and supply schedules are as follows. So we haven't seen supply and demand schedules for a little while. This is from those intro lessons, right? We're used to looking at graphs. But remember, the supply and demand schedules just represent the same information in a table format rather than in a graph format. So if you look at part A there, graph the demand curve and supply curve. Mark and label the equilibrium point. So I'm actually ahead of you guys. I've already done this, and that's because I didn't think it would be very interesting for you guys to watch me spend 10 minutes trying to graph this thing. But what you are going to do is you're going to go to the next page. You're going to go to page 48. You'll notice there's a graph table there, or like a graph paper set up there for you. And what you're going to do is you're going to graph the information in that chart to make some beautiful supply and demand curves like I have already done. Mine are not beautiful. Now, if you don't remember how to do that, what you're going to do, this is just sort of, elementary school graphing, right? So I'm going to look at that first row of the table, price of Toyota Prius in thousands, quantity demanded in thousands. So quantity demanded in thousands is 700. So I'm going to look at my quantity axis, grab my right pen, 700. I'm going to follow that up, find the price. Price it said was $10,000, or 10, prices in thousands. And I'm going to draw a dot. And then if I look at the next line of the chart, it says that 600, quantity 600,000. The price is $15,000. And so on. And I'm just going to keep doing that. I'm just going to keep graphing those points. Demand is a little tricky since you're kind of going backwards, but supply is a little bit more straightforward, graphing it that way. So you guys pause the video, go ahead and do that. Make sure you label your demand curve, D1, and your supply curve, S1, right there. And then once you're back, we will look at part B. All right, part B. Please write out the equilibrium price and quantity determined by market forces of the Toyota Prius. All right, so we know the equilibrium point is where supply and demand intersect. So I'm going to find that right there. And I know that to graph this, I'm just going to draw dotted lines down to each axis. All right, and I know that I'm going to label my equilibrium point, E1, it's going to change. Then over here we have equilibrium price 1, that's also going to change. Equilibrium quantity down here in the quantity axis, 1. All right, beautiful. So in order to find that information, right, because it says I need to write out the equilibrium price and quantity determined by market forces, here's what I'm going to write. So I'm going to follow for price. I'm going to take a look at the price axis. It looks like the equilibrium price is $25,000, right? So 25, and you're writing this under part C. Equilibrium quantity, not 2. Equilibrium quantity 1 is equal to, and I'm going to find that on my graph. Follow the line down to the quantity axis, 400,000. All right, easy peasy, we've already done part 1. All right, let's look at part 2. Okay, well, first of all, there's a little note, so let's read that. Please note, the Honda Accord Hybrid competes with the Toyota Prius for hybrid car buyers. Okay, well, why did they include that note there? It's going to tell us something about Honda Accord hybrids and Toyota Priuses. So already we should be starting to good. Okay, they're starting to think there's some kind of relationship between these two goods. So if they compete with each other for buyers, if they're kind of more or less, it sounds like same quality, same price, so then maybe that will change. Okay, well, what kind of goods are those? Those are substitute goods. So I'm going to keep that in the back of my head for now. Okay, all right. Now, what is changing? Consider the following scenario. The Honda increased the price of the Accord Hybrid by 35%. Aha, okay. So I'm going to look at part A. How will this affect the market for Toyota Prius? And then explain why. Okay, so the way you want to tackle these problems, you go, okay, something has changed. Well, first of all, is that a change that's going to affect demand? Is it affecting consumers? Or is it a change that's going to affect supply? Okay, well, now that I know that, what's it going to do to demand or to supply? Is it going to increase demand or decrease it, or increase or decrease supply? Then I need to explain why. So what factor, what determinant of supply or determinant of demand is causing that change, right? So here, I've already kind of figured out, so a Honda Accord hybrid and a Toyota Prius, well, those are substitute goods, right? So a consumer is probably going to buy one or the other. Well, it looks like the price of the Honda Accord has changed, right? It's increased. So I know that when the price of a substitute good increases, that is going to cause demand for the other good to increase, right? Because if the Honda Accord's now really expensive and consumers are thinking, well, I want to buy a hybrid car, I could go with the Accord, I could go with the Prius. Well, the Accord's too expensive now. I'm not going to buy that, right? No, I'm going to go buy the Prius. So what's going to happen is that consumer demand for the Prius is going to increase. So what I'm going to write for A, I'm going to erase this. Demand, let's make it dark, for the Prius increases because the price of a grid increased. Boom. All right, excellent, part A. Now what's part B going to ask me to do? Show this change by drawing your new curve on your graph from question 1A. Mark and label the new equilibrium point. That should be point there, it got cut off. We can kind of intuit that, right? All right. So what I need to do now, so demand increased, right? So, okay, well, I already know that. I know how to draw that. I just draw the curve shifting to the right. All right, so let's do that. I'm going to grab a new color. You grab a new color too. By the way, you are graphing this as I am too, and writing this as I am too. All right. And remember, I need to label it D2. And then I also need to label something else, right? It says to label the new equilibrium point, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find this new spot where this new demand line and this old supply line, where they intersect. I'm going to draw a big old dot there. I'm going to label it E2. I'm going to draw dotted lines to the axes. All right, and then write EP2 and EP1. All right, I've done that. Beautiful. What do we notice has changed here? So equilibrium price started here. So it started at $25,000, right? And now it's shifted to $35,000, so it's gone up. Okay, so that's how supply and demand intersect. That's what we're looking at here, right? So we know that if demand is going to increase, supply stays the same, that will push equilibrium price higher, right? Awesome, that's really good for the sellers. But as we look at number 3, right, the sellers are going to make a mistake. Okay, now suppose, which this is number 3, now suppose Toyota dealers continue to sell the Prius at $25,000. Okay, so will there be a shortage or a surplus of Toyota Priuses, which is part A? All right, so let's think about this, right? So what they're doing, and I'm going to draw this on my graph, you draw it too. So they set the price at $25,000. But what's the problem there, right? They have set the price below equilibrium price. What do we know happens when you set the price below equilibrium, or you set the price below equilibrium price? What does that lead to? Does that lead to a shortage, or does it lead to a surplus, right? It leads to a surplus, because we'll notice that quantity demanded exceeds quantity supplied. So if we follow the supply line down to quantity, so QS is around 400, and QD is around 700. So what's happening here, right, is quantity demanded is 700, quantity supplied is 400, about, depending on where you drew your graph. So there's going to be a shortage of 300,000 Toyota Priuses, right? So consumers are descending on the car dealerships in a frenzy, ready to buy that cheap Toyota Prius. Now the price of the substitute good has gone up, and suppliers are not able to keep that in the Toyota. They're not able to keep enough Toyota Priuses in stock. They're 300,000 short. Oh no, too bad, so sad. All right, now let's look at number 4. What would occur if the government passed a law requiring, no, for number 3, sorry, I'm actually gonna go back a little bit. So what I'm gonna write for part A is I'm going to write shortage. What I'm going to write for part B is I need to explain. The really easy way to do this is just to write QD is greater than QS. That's all I need you to write. That's it. If you have a nice, long, wordy way of explaining it, like I just spent about 5 minutes doing, you can write that, or you could just write this. All right, now let's get on to number 4. Okay, what would happen if the government passed a law requiring all hybrid car manufacturers to replace the batteries of its hybrid cars for free every 6 years? Okay. How is that going to affect the market for the Toyota Prius? Show the change by drawing the new curve on your graph. Label your new equilibrium point. Notice that we don't actually need to write anything down for what's happening here, but we do need to think about what's happening in order to draw that, right? Okay, so the scenario is the government passed a law requiring all hybrid car manufacturers to replace the batteries of hybrid cars for free every 6 years. So what that is there, that's the government passing increased regulations. So we know that that affects supply, and we know that that causes supply to decrease, right? So if supply is decreasing, I'm going to need to draw the curve shifting to the left. So let me grab another color. Ooh, I'm just gonna use orange, that's gross. All right, so here's my supply curve. It is shifted to the left, and I need to label it S2. All right, now you don't need to do this, but just FYI, this is why we're doing this whole thing. If you're curious why, okay, well, we're graphing this because I need to show how to do it. But take a look at what's happened to equilibrium price here. Look at that. It went even higher. Whoops. All right, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again next time.